Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all and to be talking about something that is very near and dear to my heart. In fact, it's a sense that I'm sure I came into this world with, and we all do, being beings of sound, but it was how I discovered this magical place of a portal. So as I talk about our harmonic resonance, right? We all are frequency, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we go through the talk today. And we all are sound. We are sound beings. And there is such a joy when we go into this place in listening, in deep listening, and we begin to tune the instrument of us, for we are instruments. We have all different domains of ourselves, right? So we have a domain that is physical. We have a domain that is mental. We are emotional. We are spiritual, subconscious, karmic, ancestral. All of those pieces within us have vibrations. That means that they are, in addition to vibrating, they are sounding at some frequency level. We know that through the words and the teachings of Einstein, the famous equation, E equals mc squared, where everything is energy. Our thoughts and emotions create vibrations. And we know that our biophotons carry these vibrations affecting everything around us. As Dr. Bruce Lipton says, our cells are affected by our environment. And wow, our thoughts and emotions are a very powerful piece of that environment. So remembering vibration equals frequency equals sound. And we all affect the global field. So all of these vibrational strings are in need of tuning. What's tuning got to do with this, you might say? You ever think about that? That perhaps sometimes these strings, these energetic strings, go out of tune. They get a little bit of a twang. Why? Because things come in that catch us off guard or cause an emotional reaction, mental judgment, something that upsets us. And in that state of being upset, something can go out of tune. Now remember, those strings might not be something, and they really are not most times, things that in our day-to-day awareness we are feeling. Although, when we stop and we start learning how to tune in, we find that often there is a slight little tightness or a twinge, or something we feel somewhere within our field. We'll talk a little bit more about those places a little bit later. So tuning is key. It's essential. It's how we harmonize ourselves, and it's how we create and are able to sustain our own health and resilience. We are talking about the very basics of harmony versus dissonance or cacophony. There's a lot of dissonance and cacophony in our world today and in these times of transformation, times that we've never ever witnessed before. So it is our job more than ever to begin to learn to tune. For as we tune all that is around us. We harmonize. So the first step we have is in getting aligned physically. As a musician and a teacher for many years of hundreds of thousands of musicians, I always talk about the physical alignment. And my students would always be so intrigued that the places of alignment in the body itself also align with our chakras, something I would bring in the back door for those who did not understand that language. So thinking about the soles of the feet being planted firmly on the ground, feeling roots growing into the center of the earth. And the same must be felt with those two roots, the sit bones at the bottom where we sit. When we are on top of the sit bones, really, really important, we then line up the rest of our points of balance with the soles of the feet and the sit bones. If we sit back in a chair and behind our sit bones, or we're just hunched over, like at the computer or whatever we're doing, we may not realize it, but parts of our body are fighting, pulling energetically to say, come on, we don't want you to fall over. Stand up straight. Our head is like a bowling ball, right? It weighs 10 to 12 pounds. So when we take that off alignment and center, we're creating other kinds of energetic twangs physically in our body. So coming up from the sit bones, imagine you have this triangle that goes up from both sit bones to the navel. And from the navel, you now have a string going straight up into the diaphragm, up to the sternum, the bone in front of the chest, the heart area. And from that heart area, we imagine the reverse triangle going out to our two shoulders. Now there's a match. So those shoulders are our third major point of balance that are now aligned over the sit bones and over the soles of the feet. My third magic place for alignment, especially with my musicians, when they're playing their instruments, are the earlobes. For when the earlobe is over the shoulder, that head is perfectly aligned. So the bowling ball is having to be pulled back with the muscles in our neck and our upper back. And then we are totally aligned with the center of our head. If you begin to work with this, as I'm speaking it, you might notice a little difference in the way your muscles feel right now. Is there any more ease in breathing? Is there any less tension up here? Sometimes people get tired when they start to sit this way because their lower back hasn't actually sat that straight in quite a while. But with a little bit of practice, it does create a lot more ease and flow. Now, let's go to the next important place for tuning. Our mental and emotional come from. Okay. So remember, I mentioned that I found this portal. When I was 3.5 years old, I remember going up to the spinet in my living room, just touching the keys and being in awe of the sound. Now, my mother, who played the piano, noticed this. So she came over, and with love, she began to show me the keys, teach me. But back in those days, I don't really remember the actual way I learned, but I know it was from love. So her come from was her joy in teaching, her joy in wanting to show me this beautiful way of being able to make sound. And then as I grew a little bit older, and I would sometimes get cranky as a little girl, my dear mother would say, honey, it's not the what you're saying, it's the how you're saying it. And what we know is that that truly speaks to the intent behind it. As I grew a little older, that how became a lesson in learning how to modulate the tone so that the message could be received by the listener. If my intent has an energy of judgment or wanting to prove myself right, making my point, then there's an edge there. There's an energetic edge. It's a little bit of a twang, a little dissonance, and it will often push the listener away. When the intent and that is coming from a place of neutrality, it's a good place to start to learn to be today in these trying times and trying to have coherent communication with people. Then our message has a better chance of being able to land with someone and be heard. So ask yourself, are you looking from the seat of your higher self? Or are you looking from the seat of your ego's personality? The protective self, the piece of us that wants to be not hurt. And that's a very old piece, right, of us. So just have a ponder on those 2 points. Are you looking to validate or to perform in some way? Or are you simply sharing from the heart and soul? Where's the intent? Remember that our soul has a harmonizing effect on the entire field. It harmonizes. So what are further results of not tuning the string? Well, we already see the first one there, and it's all the result of what I'm going to show next and talk about. Our effectiveness is compromised when we're not tuned. We have an inability to deliver healing frequencies to ourselves and others because our energy in its come from is one of a fractured, split, duplicitous energy. This type of split energy is received by others as well as within our own cells. So we simply don't end up being as effective at what we were attempting to do as we could be simply because of this split of the attention, right? Still going back to the come from. Where's the come from? In higher vibrational tuning, let's think about, we got to go higher now. And there's one that is probably at the highest level of frequency, and that is joy. Joy emits a certain vibrational frequency that the world around us responds to in kind. We know through quantum science that what happens when we are experiencing joy is that we emit a certain vibrational frequency, right? It's felt, it vibrates. The photon coherence that it is generating in that moment generates a reality that we get to walk through that is an absolute vibrational match to our joy. As we move into the energetic heart, we share and align with intention. Now we're really in that energetic domain. You change something when you're really at the vibration of this line. When we are in this energetic heart, we are in a different place in our brains as well. I like to refer to it as, I'm not so much in my thinking brain, my chatter brain. There's a stillness. And in this coherence, I have access to higher cortical thinking, to increased creativity, and increasing awareness of more opportunities for resolution to problems. It's a very powerful place to be. And in it, we are speaking and coming from our true self. In deep interconnectivity, we're now going into our strings again, right? These strings all affect that vibrational field line resonance. I'm going to bring in some of the research from the HeartMath Institute, of which I'm so proud to be a part as a certified trainer. And I've been working with HeartMath tools, both coaching, teaching, and research for many years. We know that these resonant frequencies of the earth, all of these are the same as our hearts and brains. And they get plucked, just like guitar strings, and they vibrate. They get plucked by the solar winds. One of the most common standing wave resonant frequencies is 0.01 hertz. I'm sure many of you may have heard of this, because 0.1 hertz is the frequency of the coherent heart rhythm, right? So it's 0.1 hertz. It's a standing wave resonant frequency. It's also the frequency of our coherent heart rhythm. Our cardiac field, that heart field, can be measured several feet away from the body. Yet we can only measure a brainwave about an inch. The field line resonances are the same as the cardiac field, and the Schumann resonances are the same as the brainwaves. In musical terms, the field line resonances are the low frequencies that are generated from instruments like the bass drum or the double bass. These set the pace, providing a base, a foundation. This is very powerful when we begin to realize that we vibrate the same frequencies. Feeling that 0.1 hertz that extends outward from us and is connecting with that 0.1 hertz in the field line. Just take a moment, take a few deep breaths. And allow your focus of your breath to come, the awareness into the area in front of the chest and the heart center. Begin to become aware of the beating of your heart. Listen to the sound. Listening also to the sound of your breath. On the inhale, drawing in feeling of appreciation, gratitude. And on the exhale, sending this appreciation and gratitude outward to all that is around you in your field, knowing that it continues to travel outward. We are now having a coherent effect on ourselves as well as the field. This is essential for health and well-being. So now a little bit more from HeartMath, looking at this. Our emotions affect our physiology more than thoughts. This is interesting, but our emotions are the primary drivers of the activity in our major body systems. They're the primary drivers. I'm going to read something from HeartMath here this is very interesting. I found this in part of what they were talking about. According to Google, the most searched item during the New Year's period of 2016 was how to reduce stress. This was consistent with a project they did in 2015, where they interviewed a large number of healthcare professionals, human resource administrators in hospitals, and corporations. The message was clear and consistent. So many people were overwhelmed and exhausted. And more specifically, they were looking for the ability to self-regulate the emotions. When we look at what people tend to call stress, we must remember that it is always a personal, what they call it is personal. What someone's stress may not be yours. That's okay. But we must remember, importantly, that these are the drivers. They determine our level of engagement in life's events, what motivates us and what we care about. It is in the frustration, irritation, anger, anxiety, or feelings of overwhelm which people are so often experiencing in being stressed, where we get out of coherence and we disengage in unhealthful ways in life's events, in motivation, and what we care about. So this is really important in terms of learning how to identify the emotions and the attitudes, the thoughts we are experiencing in the moment, and the very important element of choice. Now I'd like to go through the same being in the looking glass. And let's talk about the sounds of music. I'm going to refer to the work of Dr. John Diamond and his work with behavioral kinesiology, right? So he did muscle testing. Many of you may know of this work that demonstrated that not only could certain substances make a person's muscles strong or weak, but so could music. Music does this. But it was fascinating that it was not just the composition itself, the acoustics of the room or instruments. It also had to do with the intention of the performer, the attitude of the person creating the music. Of course, I find this extremely fascinating and know it to be true. Because if I have a person as a performer, now we're looking at a musician right now who is stressed, irritated, upset, that's going to tense their muscles, it's going to create incoherent heart rhythms, and it's going to come through that sound. It's going to land differently on the listeners and not have the same effect it would if they were coming from a place of coherence and joy and wanting to share their music. So we are emanating, and this is proof in how our thoughts and frequencies are felt through what we do in the field. Music is one example of this. However, and this is even more important for us to think about tonight, the exact same thing is true in verbal communication. It's the same, right? It's what my mother said. It's not the what, it's the how, it's the intent. So as we up-level and become more coherent, our energetic blueprint changes. It changes. This can be heard through the tone of our voice. It is felt in the musculature of the body. Have you ever noticed that when you get irritated or someone says something a certain way to you, there's a tightening somewhere in the body, in what I call maybe your Achilles heel? Just a little bit of an irritation comes in. So we have an automatic response, right? The mind-body response It's instant, it's automatic, and it's felt and generated at the same time. It is also activated from the heart. So this energetic blueprint of up-leveling and becoming more coherent, it all starts with the emotions, the thoughts, and the effects they have on the heart. Absolutely. As we clear the incoherence and depleting attitudes and emotions, we allow the higher soul self to come forth. Our harmonic resonance is energetically heard and felt by others, as well as the field. Now let's have a look at what is coherence. According to the HeartMath great definition, it is an optimal state in which our heart, mind, and emotions are aligned and in sync. And let's think about, of those three, which is the driver? What's creating the coherence? It's the emotions, right? And their effect on the heart rate signal, and its signal is going up to the brain. So physiologically, when we're in coherence, our immune system, hormonal, and nervous systems function in a state of energetic coordination. Beautiful. They're all symphonically tuned. Heart-brain communication is amazing because the heart is a brain having its own complex nervous system, and it's sending far more information to our brains than the brain ever sends down to the heart. And the patterns in the neural signals from the heart especially affect the brain centers involved in perception, emotional experience, and self-regulation. Let's think about that effect on perception. When I'm incoherent, I'm upset, I'm really stressed out, I don't have the same capacity to pause, listen, and respond to something. I react. That's the reactive brain. So we want to keep ourselves in this awareness of the emotional field, because what happens with emotions and heart rhythms? This to me is one of the most fascinating parts of this. And I've taught this for many, many years. During my years in Cleveland, I was not only on faculty at the Institute of Music, but for a year I worked at the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Center, and I introduced this biofeedback. I worked with many patients using the HeartMath techniques. And one of the things I love about biofeedback is our bodies, they can't lie, they never lie. And so we might be telling ourselves a good story, especially if we tend to have stress happening on a daily basis, multiple times a day. That becomes our baseline. And as a baseline, a lot of people don't think of that as stress. Yet when we look at the heart rhythms, fascinating here, take a look at the graph on the left. So that incoherent heart rhythm is supposed to be variable, but that's a more chaotic pattern that is caused by frustration, worry, irritation, impatient, judgment, judgmental attitudes, becoming impatient with people. It's going to keep that going for a very long time. We think about what happens instantly when we go into feeling calm. You may not get to some of the higher ones right away. When I worked with many people here in 2018 after the fires that were pretty catastrophic, some people had a really hard time. And some of the best ones that they could begin to generate were courage and calm, trust, several of them would use a little mantra like, I've got this. For what did I've got this mean? It embodied the courage, confidence, feeling that they could go from one activity to the other. And as they began to work with the techniques and monitor the heart rate, we began to create over and over these coherent patterns. And the graph on the right is such a beautiful example of what the heart rate does when it's incoherent. It speeds up, it slows down. Speeds up, it slows down. Up and down. This is balancing our autonomic nervous system, the gas pedal, which we need, that's good adrenaline. So the heart rate speeds up. Then we have the brake pedal, and the heart rate slows down. So when they're in balance, this is facilitating our brain function and promoting optimal performance. So the heart rhythms are affecting your physical and mental performance. And they're going to brain centers, one of which is my absolute sweet spot. So we're going to talk about this one. And that is the thalamus. The thalamus is synchronizing your cortical activity. It's also your center for all of your sensory input and output. So I'm going to take this into an example through music. Or it could be you giving a speech or doing some daily activity, which are all performance. If my signal from my heart is one of confidence, calm, ease, appreciation, it's that coherent speeding up and slowing down, that message up to the thalamus is activating sensory output. How do you think that's going to affect the flow of what I say, of for me as a performer, as a pianist, of what I play? Is going to have a very different effect. As a musician, I often talk about the fact that it activates what I call my inner ear, this ability to tune in and listen. I'm listening really to these frequency bands, to be honest. It's not something that's auditory, perhaps, but that in turn gives a signal. I call it down my magical superhighway of my arm and out my fingertips to the piano. And as that is communicating, I go into a flow state, right? It's the zone. Athletes like to call it, right? It's a zone. Because we are in this flow, I'm thinking, but I'm thinking from a different, higher cortical place. I am keeping a check and balance on my adrenaline, cortisol. It's coming out, right? It's that speeding up, slowing down. But if I get too much of that adrenaline, which will happen instantly when I go into incoherence, there's going to be a different message going up to the brain centers. And the brain, if it receives the message coming from incoherent heart rhythm, gets the message, she's in trouble now. Let's send some ammunition in. And it will activate your adrenaline cortisol channel. Goes full throttle. All right, so that stressor gets out of the way and you go on your day. Except in our body, that doesn't shut off right away. Believe it or not. That continues to drip through the body for several hours. And what if something else comes in? And this is how we get ourselves into depletion. Now we have a health food store that's unbelievable in our body that we can activate instantly when we shift into those attitudes and feelings of appreciation, confidence, and calm. For that is the signal that changes the heart rhythm. It is the plug, it's the shut-off valve to your cortisol, adrenaline. It opens up your activation of serotonin, melatonin, DHEA, all things that people are buying off the health food shelves. Well, we generate it. We have this health food store inside of us. The more we practice, the health outcomes are unbelievable. We know this through the science and the research of HeartMath. I know this in my personal life through many years ago, several serious operations, that the body has the ability to heal itself. We're also learning that in our coherence and in our field, we have that ability to not only tune and heal ourselves, but to tune and heal each other. So now I'd like to take us back to an exercise, and it is the exercise. I'm going to go back to my little 3-year-old or 5-year-old self. I'm not going to be at the piano, but I'm going to be in one of those other glorious favorite places of ours as children, where we can activate the same feelings of creativity, joy, fun. Wow, when I was doing this at the piano at that little age, I'll tell you, I just thought I had this portal. Wow, I could do anything. And there could be playing 2 notes sounded magical to me. There was no judgment, no feeling that, oh, it has to be a lot of notes, or it has to be this, it has to be perfect. No, that is the true come from place. That's the reason we do what we do. It's from a state of love and joy. So let's go to the playground. Take a moment, take a few breaths, and I'd love you to call to mind your favorite childhood activity on the playground. I'll bring up a few and then I'll tell you mine. Was it the swing? Or maybe the seesaw? Seesaw is a fun one to think about, right? Because if you're the kid on the top, how's the only way you get to the bottom? I've asked this in hundreds of my classes. And I'd have somebody, oh, you got to push and you got to jump down. I said, well, no, there's somebody else who has to assist, right? The person on the bottom has to push off. Beautiful example of how, as little ones, we learn cooperation. We learn how to play together. How about the slide? That feeling of, ooh, there I go. Here I go. Sandbox. That was my favorite. Definitely my favorite. Playing tag. I remember years doing that around the neighborhood. It was a lot of fun. The merry-go-round. The monkey bars. Or was it something else? Back to my sandbox for a moment. I just love the image, especially as an adult, really calling my little child into the room. I'm like, wow, that was so much fun. I could be messy. I got a little sand between my toes, in my pants, in between my fingers. And I create this imaginary thing out of sand and perhaps call it an imaginary name and be in glee. And oftentimes I would find myself humming, making sound gleefully in that moment. And then, even more fun, I would knock it down and start to make something new. So there was this, wow, knowing of this beauty and being able to create and create again. Also brought in that idea of things always changing, nothing having to be fixed and permanent as we grow. So let's hop on your favorite play activity. Just take a moment. Try to call in that little you. I did this recently with a group. We worked for 6 weeks together. And for some, it was very difficult at first. And then with one woman, she says, oh, I know what it was. It was the tire swing. And I said, well, all right. Allow yourself to feel you holding that tire. And she did. I said, now what do you feel? She goes, oh, I can feel the motion. So we're going to bring in a little sensory activation here. First, I'd like you to begin breathing a little slower and deeper than usual, as we did before. Now, that little you is in a happy place. So we're going to breathe into that heart center and activate that heart, feeling that excitement. I want you to feel the air around you from back then. What temperature is it? I remember that person about the swing, the tire swing. She talked about the clouds in the sky that day. She talked about the air. She remembered it all. What did you smell? Maybe it had rained the day before. Maybe there was still a little smell of rain. Or maybe there's some flowers blooming and you can smell them. What did you see around you? What did you notice? And what did you hear? Pull all of those senses in. Right? Let them come together, feeling the experience, being the experience. And ask yourself, how do you feel? There are some profound lessons here from the playground. They're profound. For this is the seat of our soul, creativity, awareness, communication. Because golly, when we were on the playground, we were not alone. We communicated with other children. Like on the seesaw, we learned how to communicate and work together. We did that with many activities. So I want you to consider these things. Feel your strings now of you. In fact, some of those playground activities may have activated or brought in an alignment or awareness, something in your subconscious, things forgotten about or put in there, perhaps locked away, maybe even ancestral, remembering your parents, your grandparents. Allow them all to come into the room of your heart. Aligning with their hearts and tuning. For as you tune your strings, all of those pieces of you, you are tuning their strings as well. Imagine the symphony of strings within our ancestors. Can you imagine? It's cosmic. It's huge. So just Feel deeply into that resonance. I'm so grateful for you joining me. If you have questions or comments after this, I invite you to contact me by email with anything you might wish to discuss. It has been my joy. Thank you.